A young mother was kicked out because of her old clothes. But the Millionaire car dealership owner gave her something more than a car. The wind carried a bite that morning, the kind that cuts through coats and quickens footsteps. Mira Halden, 27, stood at the edge of the dealership's lot with her 3-year-old daughter, Lena, bundled in a second-hand jacket 2 sizes too big. Mira had debated even coming. She had stared at the envelope in her purse all morning, the one with the savings she'd gathered over the past year from working split shifts at the diner, watching other people sip lattes behind glass windows. But the old Corolla had finally died. Not stalled, died. And Lena needed a car seat that didn't buckle sideways when the car turned. She pulled the glass door open with her free hand. It was heavier than she expected, the kind that wasn't meant to be held open long for people who hesitated. Inside, the showroom gleamed in polished silence. Cars lined the floor like sculptures, sleek, cold, silent. A sharp smell of synthetic leather and lemon-scented floor wax floated in the air. Behind a tall white counter, a receptionist in a trim black blouse looked up. "Can I help you?" she asked with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm looking for something used. Reliable. Under 15,000, Mira said, adjusting Lena's mittened hand in hers. "Just something safe." The woman blinked. Then glanced down, first at the faded knees of Myra's jeans, then at Lena's red cheeks, then at the frayed hem of Myra's coat. "One moment," she said tightly, tapping something on her keyboard. A tall man in a fitted blazer approached a moment later. His name tag read, Paul, Senior Sales Consultant, though the way he walked said he liked the word senior more than consultant. "Yes?" he asked Mira without introduction. "I was hoping to see the Civic or maybe the Sonata out front. The ones listed online for." "We're very busy today," Paul interrupted, eyes flicking to Lena, who was humming under her breath beside the coffee machine. "And we don't typically show inventory unless the buyer is pre-approved. Especially for budget models. Do you have financing in place?" Mira straightened. "I brought a down payment in cash. The rest I plan to finance." Paul smiled with thin-lipped condescension. "We prefer not to keep serious buyers waiting for window shoppers. I'll have to ask you to come back with pre-approval, or maybe check a smaller dealership that deals more in starter inventory." Mira flushed. "I'm not a window shopper." "I'm sure," he said. "But we also have an image to maintain. This is Fairwind Motors. Our clientele expects, well, something different." He didn't say, "People who don't walk in with children and patchy shoes." But he didn't have to. Mira felt the shame crawl up her neck. She reached for Lena's hand and turned to leave without another word. The doors opened again, this time slower, as though reluctant to see them go. What happened next could have ended there, a routine moment in a city full of invisible cruelties. But it didn't. From the mezzanine above the showroom, Julian Vance had been watching. He hadn't meant to. He had come in early that morning, avoiding another unnecessary lunch meeting, choosing instead to sit behind the smoked glass balcony and go over financials. But the child's voice had caught his attention, a melody of humming, soft and off-key, and then the quickness with which the sales team moved to dismiss them. He watched as Mira walked out, her posture straight, her mouth pressed into a line. No protest, no scene, just a quiet retreat. Julian stood and walked downstairs. By the time Mira reached the parking lot, pulling Lena along as the wind whipped her coat open, she heard someone call after her. "Excuse me," the voice said, calm, unhurried. "Miss, just a moment." She turned. The man striding toward her looked completely out of place in the wind. No coat, dark sweater over a collared shirt, hair tousled but precise. He wasn't anyone she'd seen inside. "I'm Julian Vance," he said, stopping a few feet away. "I own the dealership." She blinked. "I don't want any trouble." "I know," he said gently. "And I'm sorry. I saw what happened in there. That's not how we treat people." Mira looked away, cheeks burning. "It's fine. I shouldn't have come here." Julian hesitated. "Would you come back inside? As my guest?" She studied him for a moment. Why? Because you're exactly the kind of customer we should be serving, he said. And because there are going to be a few people inside who won't be working here after today. Mira looked at him, this man with sharp eyes and a steady voice, and saw no mockery in his tone, only something that resembled apology. Or maybe curiosity. Lena tugged on her hand. Mommy, I'm cold. Julian's eyes dropped to the child and softened. There's cocoa in the lounge, he said. Real stuff. Marshmallows too. Mira glanced back at the building, then at the parking lot, then finally at Julian again. Okay, she said. But just to look. He opened the door for her. And that was how it started. The dealership looked different on the way back in. Perhaps it was the fact that Mira wasn't walking in alone this time, or that Julian Vance walked just a step behind her, not rushing, not hurting, simply present. But whatever it was, the stares from the staff were quieter now, tinged with unease. Julian didn't say a word to Paul or the receptionist as they passed. He didn't need to. His silence spoke volumes, calm, composed, and final. In the corner of the showroom, the lounge sat behind frosted glass walls, a quiet space meant for negotiations and cappuccino machines. Julian held the door for Mira and Lena, and within seconds, the smell of fresh coffee and heated milk cut through the sterile air of the building. Lena beamed when she saw the cocoa dispenser. She looked up at Mira, eyes wide with unspoken permission. Go ahead, Mira said softly. As Lena fumbled with marshmallows, Mira stood quietly near the window, watching the rows of cars glint beneath the gray sky. It felt strange to be inside again, stranger still to be escorted in by a man who claimed to own the place. Julian leaned against the opposite wall, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. He wasn't watching her like a man appraising something, he was observing. Taking in details. Mira had learned long ago to recognize the difference. You've been saving for a while, he said after a moment. Not a question, an observation. She didn't respond at first. Then, over a year. Tips mostly. Some extra bookkeeping shifts at night. I'm not looking for charity. I didn't offer any. Julian replied evenly. Just respect. That stopped her. She turned toward him, arms folded but not defensive, just tired. Why do you care? You could have let it go. I'm sure that sales rep didn't do anything you haven't seen 100 times. You're probably right, Julian admitted. But lately I've been asking myself why I don't stop it more often. Mira blinked. She didn't know what kind of answer she'd expected. Something corporate, maybe. Something that deflected blame with smooth language. But this felt unpolished. Honest even. She wasn't sure what to do with that. I'm not here to impress anyone, she said. I just need something that starts every morning. Something that doesn't lock me out in the rain. Julian nodded. I'd like to help you find that. If that's okay. Are you selling it to me or giving it away? Mira asked, narrowing her eyes. Selling, he said without hesitation. But not through them. He jerked his chin toward the sales floor. You'll deal with me directly. And if I say no? Then I'll wish you well and walk you out myself. She studied him for a long moment, then glanced at Lena, who was now stirring her cocoa with intense focus. All right, Mira said. Show me what's real. They walked the lot slowly, Julian skipping the showroom entirely and leading her through a side door to a quieter section behind the main building, where the newer trade-ins and certified used cars were parked. It was quieter here. Less for show, more for practicality. This one, he said, stopping beside a 2016 Honda Accord. Silver, clean, nothing flashy. One owner. New tires. 2 years left on the warranty. How much? $13,900, Julian said. You can put 5 down? 5.2. Mira corrected. In cash. Julian raised an eyebrow. You came ready. I don't like being told I don't belong. He smiled at that. Neither do I. Back in the lounge, Julian stepped out briefly to get paperwork. Mira sat in one of the armchairs with Lena curled next to her, head resting on her lap. It had been a long morning. When he returned, Julian handed her a slim folder. No hidden fees. No markup. No nonsense. Mira opened the folder, and blinked. The price was lower than expected. Why's it only 11? Julian shrugged. Because I saw the way Paul looked at you. Consider the difference my apology. Mira looked up at him then. Not with suspicion, not even surprise, but with a kind of wary gratitude. She was not used to kindness coming without a hook in the bait. Thank you, she said and meant it. Julian nodded. You'll have the car by Thursday. We'll deliver it to your apartment. How do you know where I live? I don't, he said. Yet. And then, almost as an afterthought, he placed something else on the table, a small, sealed envelope. Mira frowned. What's that? My card, Julian said, already stepping back. And a letter. If you ever feel like telling me who you are, beyond the car, I'd like to know. He paused. You walked into my building like you were bracing for a fight. I can't stop thinking about that. Mira stared at the envelope. I don't owe you anything, she said carefully. Julian didn't flinch. I know. Then he turned and left, his footsteps quiet against the tile. Mira didn't open the envelope. Not yet. But she didn't throw it away either. Thursday came dressed in rain. The kind that drummed lightly against windows but never fully cleared the sky. Mira stood by her apartment window, a mug of weak coffee in her hand, watching the empty curb outside with mixed nerves. The apartment was small, one bedroom. Mira shared with Lena, who still slept in the corner beneath a faded quilt covered in cartoon stars. She didn't want to hope too much. Life had taught her better. At exactly 9:08 a.m., a silver Honda pulled up. Clean. Quiet. It didn't belong on the street. A man in a blue mechanic's jacket stepped out. He wasn't from the sales team, too unpolished for that. His name tag read Tom. He walked to the door with a clipboard in hand, rang the bell once, and waited with the calm patience of someone who didn't mind being ignored. Mira opened the door with Lena balanced on her hip. You Mira Halden? The man asked. I am. Got a delivery for you. Honda Accord, then ending in 1147. Clean, titles in the glove compartment, keys are here. He handed them to her with a practiced motion. Mr. Vance said to make sure you knew, oil's fresh, tires are new, brakes checked. Mira nodded slowly. That's it? Tom gave a small smile. That's it. He hesitated, then added, he doesn't usually do this. The boss, I mean. Deliver cars himself. But he asked me to take care of it. Said you were important. Mira said nothing and Tom didn't press. He turned back toward the truck idling at the end of the street. A moment later he was gone. Mira stood in the doorway for a long while, holding the keys. They felt heavier than expected. The car smelled faintly of lemon and something else, cedar maybe. The kind of scent that didn't come from dealerships but from someone being meticulous. She ran her hand across the steering wheel, felt the cool weight of responsibility settle over her. No surprises. No debt traps. Just a car. A decent one. Lena crawled into the back seat and announced that the seats felt like fancy pancakes. Mira laughed for the first time in days. But the envelope from Monday still sat unopened on her dresser. It had survived being knocked over twice and nearly thrown away once. And still, something kept her from tearing the flap. That night, when Lena was asleep, Mira sat on the edge of her bed and opened it. Inside was a single card, Julian's, plain white with charcoal lettering, and a handwritten note folded in half. She read it twice. Mira, you don't know me your story. I know that. But I find myself wanting to understand why someone like you walks into a dealership like that and refuses to flinch. You didn't ask for help. You didn't posture. You just stood your ground. That takes something I rarely see in the boardrooms I sit in every week. Something honest. If you ever want to talk, not about cars, but about what you've built to survive, I'd listen. No agenda. My number's below. Julian. Mira read the letter once more, slower this time. She wasn't sure what to call the feeling it stirred. It wasn't quite trust. Not yet. But it was something quieter. A flicker of attention that hadn't come wrapped in pity or expectation. She placed the note back inside the envelope and tucked it into her nightstand. She didn't call him. Didn't text. But she didn't forget the words either. 2 days later, the diner where she worked was short-staffed on a Friday night, the kind of shift that ran long and ended with sore feet and short tips. Mira clocked out near midnight, bundled her coat tight, and walked toward the parking lot to find her car. It wasn't until she sat behind the wheel that she noticed the text. Julian Vance, hope the car's treating you well. No need to reply. Just wanted you to know I meant what I said. She didn't respond right away. But she stared at the message the entire drive home. By Sunday, Mira had reread the message a dozen times. Not because it was clever, it wasn't. In fact, it was painfully simple. But there was something about the restraint in Julian's words that unsettled her more than any flirtation could have. He wasn't asking for anything. Not a dinner. Not a thank you. Just a quiet confirmation that she had been seen, and it had left a mark. That made it harder to dismiss. Mira hadn't told anyone about the car, other than her friend Tasha, who helped with babysitting when shifts collided and bills loomed. Tasha had squinted at the spotless Honda and said, "Okay, now who exactly is this guy, and does he have a brother?" Mira just shook her head. "He owns the dealership." Tasha had whistled low. "Well, that's either a dream or a lawsuit. Careful." It was Tuesday afternoon when Mira replied, "The car drives fine. No surprises. That's rare. Thank you. Nothing else." She put her phone down immediately, trying to bury the quiet twist of nerves in her stomach. She didn't expect a reply. But 5 minutes later, one came. "Glad to hear it. Also rare, people who look me in the eye and don't blink." Mira stared at the screen, surprised by the accuracy of the observation. "I've had practice," she replied before she could stop herself. This time, there was a pause. Then, "Would you ever let me buy you coffee?" "Not as payment. Not as charity. Just because I'd like to." She didn't answer for 2 days. Not because she was afraid, but because something about the invitation pressed against a wall she hadn't let anyone near since Lena's father walked out 3 weeks before her due date. A man who promised her safe things, only to vanish when it mattered. But Julian hadn't promised her anything. And he hadn't tried to charm his way past her caution either. That made her curious. On Thursday morning she sent a single word. "Maybe." To which he replied, "I'll take it." They met Saturday, in neutral territory, an old cafe Mira used to visit before Lena was born. It sat tucked between a dry cleaner and a bookstore that had been going out of business for 5 years. It was quiet, unpretentious, and dimly lit with yellow lamps shaped like teacups. Julian was already there, dressed down, gray sweater, dark jeans, no assistant or visible agenda. He stood when she entered, and didn't offer a hug or handshake. Just a nod. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," Mira replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "But then I remembered I already have the car." Julian smiled. "So this is a Mercy coffee?" "It's an audition," she said. "I'm figuring out if this is going to turn into a pitch. Or a problem." Julian chuckled. "I'm not pitching anything. I run a business, Mira. I know how to compartmentalize." "That's good," she said. "Because I don't date people who think generosity is a currency." He nodded slowly. "Noted." There was a pause then, one of those silences that didn't hang awkwardly, but rested, like two people standing at the edge of a pool deciding whether or not to wade in. Finally, Julian said, "Can I ask you something?" "Depends." "Why'd you walk in that day? You could have gone anywhere." Mira looked down at her cup. "Because I googled 5 places and your dealership had the only listing that didn't sound like a trap. And because the bus was late." He smiled. A good accident, then? I don't believe in good accidents, she said. Just clean outcomes. Julian stirred his coffee slowly. What do you believe in? Myra's expression shifted, softened, but didn't quite let go. I believe in getting home safe. In making breakfast stretch an extra day. In fixing what breaks before it takes something else with it. And lately, I believe in the idea that not everyone's trying to screw me over. Julian sat with that. Then he said, I'm not. I know, Myra said quietly. That's what scares me. They didn't touch. Didn't flirt. Didn't talk about love or fate, or the neat packaging of wounded lives. But when they left the cafe, Myra gave him her full name. And Julian watched her walk away with something new stirring in his chest, not attraction. Not yet. Something closer to respect. Something that felt like the beginning of real risk. Myra didn't tell anyone about the coffee. It was easier that way. Easier to pretend nothing had shifted, even as her thoughts returned to that quiet conversation beneath the teacup lamps. Julian hadn't asked for anything. He hadn't implied anything. And still, something about the way he listened, the way he waited for her to finish a thought, unsettled her more than if he tried to impress her. There was no rush. No push. Just a presence. That, she'd learned, was rare. 3 days later, her phone buzzed during Lena's nap. Julian Vance, can I ask a favor? You can say no. Her heart paused. He hadn't contacted her since the coffee. Go ahead. I'm helping fund a mobile community program, meals, childcare, workshops. We're hosting a launch this weekend. Nothing formal. Just food trucks and too many speeches. I thought of you. Myra frowned. Why? Because I want you to see the side of me that doesn't wear suits. The side that still believes in showing up. She stared at the message for a while. She wasn't sure what part of her it tugged on, the cautious single mother or the younger version of herself who once dreamed of starting a nonprofit before life caved in. Is it okay if I bring my daughter? It's better if you do. The event was held in a converted lot on the west side of the city. 24 folding tables, makeshift stages, portable heaters, and long rows of chairs. Kids darted between food stalls. Music played from speakers set atop plastic crates. It wasn't glamorous. Which made Myra like it immediately. Julian spotted her from across the lot. He didn't wave. He didn't come rushing over like a host courting VIPs. He just gave a slow, steady nod, and resumed helping someone unload crates of donated books. Myra watched him from a distance for a while, holding Lena's hand as they walked. He was different here, less composed, more practical. At one point, she saw him crouched to fix a snapped extension cord with duct tape and a grimace. A man used to being in control, willingly knee-deep in chaos. She respected that. Later, after a lukewarm bowl of chili and an impromptu puppet show that made Lena squeal with laughter, Myra sat alone at the edge of the lot, watching the crowd shift and scatter like clouds. Julian approached quietly. Not with urgency. Just presence. You're not a fan of public speeches, are you? He asked, sitting beside her on the bench. I used to be, Myra said. Until I realized they rarely pay rent. He smiled. Fair. They sat for a while in silence, watching children chase bubbles and exhausted volunteers stack chairs. You could be anywhere, she said finally. Why do this? Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Because it reminds me I'm not just a balance sheet. My mother was a teacher. My dad ran a garage. I built this company so I could choose where to show up. I don't always get it right, but I try. Myra tilted her head. And this thing with me. What is that? Trying? Julian turned to her. No. That's choosing. She didn't reply. Not immediately. He waited. And then he said it. I'd like to see you again. Not as a client. Not as someone I did a favor for. Just as Myra. Myra exhaled slowly. That's a complicated thing to ask. I know, he said. I have a daughter, she added. I notice, he said with a smile. She likes marshmallows and hates artificial cheese. Mira tried not to smile, but failed. Just a little. I don't date men with power complexes, she warned. I don't date people who make me forget I'm human, he replied, and his voice had no trace of performance. Just quiet truth. Mira nodded. All right, she said finally, watching a little boy in a too large hoodie chase a bubble down the sidewalk. Then here's my first condition. Julian raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. No promises, Mira said. You don't get to say this is going anywhere. No guarantees, no talk of the future. You just show up. One moment at a time. Julian looked at her for a long second. Deal, he said. And for once, that word didn't sound like a transaction. Julian picked her up the following Friday in a car that cost more than Mira had made in the last 5 years. She nearly turned around when she saw it, sleek, dark, utterly silent when it pulled to the curb outside her apartment. She hated that it made her hesitate. But Lena was already waving at the man behind the tinted glass, and Julian, in a denim jacket and plain black tee, stepped out without pretense. Too much? He asked, gesturing to the vehicle like it was a joke. Mira crossed her arms. You think? He held up both hands. Noted. Next time I'll borrow something with duct tape on the windows. Still, he opened the door for her. She let Lena climb in first, watched how gently Julian helped buckle her in. Not once did he flinch at the sticky hands or mismatched socks. That counted for something. She slid into the front seat and fastened her seatbelt in silence. You okay? He asked as they pulled away from the curb. I'm still deciding, she said flatly. He smiled without offense. That's fair. He drove them to a neighborhood Mira had only seen from bus windows. Wide sidewalks. Lawns like magazine photos. Every mailbox looked designed, not bought. When she stepped out of the car, she felt the ache of difference press against her skin. This is your world, she murmured. No, Julian said, locking the car. This is where I ended up. Not the same thing. They were attending a backyard dinner, hosted by one of Julian's nonprofit partners. Mira had agreed under 2 conditions: no mention of her job at the diner, and no introductions as someone special. Julian had nodded, no questions. Still, as they stepped into the yard, a tasteful spread of lights, soft music, and expensive wine, she felt the divide like a crack in the pavement. People noticed her. Not maliciously. Just differently. She wasn't like them. They knew it. She knew it. One woman asked, smiling, "Oh, are you Julian's assistant?" Mira smiled back. "No. I'm the one he listens to." The woman blinked. Mira excused herself before the silence could harden. Julian found her later near the drinks table, arms crossed. "Want to leave?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not yet. I'm still watching." He looked at her, serious now. "I didn't bring you here to parade you, Mira." "I know," she said. "But you did bring me here." He didn't reply right away. Then, "I wanted to see what it felt like to have someone here who sees me, not just the version I clean up for investors." "You really think that's me?" "I think you're the only person in a 10-mile radius who could call me out in front of a state senator and not blink." She smirked. "You're right. I would." He leaned against the table beside her. "Didn't realize how much I needed someone to look me in the eye like that." Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, "It's easier for me. I never grew up thinking I needed to impress men like you." Julian turned his head to her. "Men like me?" She met his gaze. "Men with choices." They left before dessert. Mira insisted on taking the train back, something about Lena needing to learn that wealth isn't a given, even when offered. Julian didn't fight her on it. Instead, he walked them to the platform, hands in his pockets, asking if Lena liked the lights at the dinner. She had. But she liked the glitter on the ticket stubs better. "I'll call you?" he asked as the train approached. Maybe, Mira said, lifting Lena onto the step. He smiled. Still making me work for it. I'm not making you do anything, she replied. You're just choosing to stay. The train doors slid shut. Julian watched as it pulled away, her silhouette seated by the window, head tilted toward her daughter, who was already asleep. He stood there long after the lights disappeared. That night, Mira stared at the ceiling while Lena snored softly beside her. She thought about how Julian had kept his distance all evening, not out of shame, but respect. She thought about the way he looked at her, not as someone to rescue, or fix, or impress, but as someone he couldn't quite figure out. And maybe didn't want to. For the first time in years, that thought didn't scare her. It scared her that it didn't. For 2 weeks, they barely spoke. Not out of conflict. Not even avoidance. Just the natural drift of two lives orbiting different centers. Julian had a quarterly board meeting in Boston. Mira picked up extra weekend shifts to cover an unexpected spike in daycare costs. He sent a few texts, brief, polite, never insistent. She replied when she had the energy, which wasn't often. He didn't push. And yet, she thought of him constantly. Thought of his silences, the ones that didn't demand explanation. Thought of the way Lena had taken to him without fear. Thought of how he watched her, not with hunger or admiration, but with attention, the rarest kind. Still, when he texted, "Dinner?" No expectations, just food. She almost didn't answer. Almost. "If I come, I pay for my own." Deal. He picked her up in a car that looked borrowed, beat-up Civic, one missing hubcap. She raised an eyebrow. "You're mocking me." "I'm blending in," he said. "You should have seen the looks I got when I tried to parallel park this thing on 83rd. They went to a small Haitian place Mira liked, tucked between a laundromat and a locksmith. She didn't bother to dress up, and Julian didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he noticed everything and just didn't say so. They ordered too much food. Talked about movies they'd never admit to liking. Mira told a story about a man at the diner who tried to pay for pancakes with a lottery ticket. And then, over dessert, Julian said, "I want to help." Myra's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Help what?" "You," he said simply. "Your life. Whatever you're carrying alone, I can." "No." She put the fork down. Julian paused. "I wasn't offering charity." "I know," Mira said, voice low. "That's what makes it worse." The air between them went still. Julian leaned forward. "Explain it to me." Mira looked away. Her voice was soft but sharp. "You can leave whenever you want. You can make a mistake, vanish for 3 days, and the world still holds you. I don't have that luxury. Every time someone tries to help me, there's always a price. I'm tired of pretending I can afford it." Julian's brow furrowed. "You think I'm trying to buy you? I think you don't know what it feels like to be owned by someone's good intentions." He sat back, quiet. Mira hated how much she hated the hurt in his expression. She hadn't meant to wound him. But something in her couldn't let the moment pass without drawing a line. "You're not wrong," Julian said after a while. "But I'm not walking away." "You should," she said quietly. He smiled, bitter and warm at once. "That's what terrifies you, isn't it?" "That I won't." She didn't answer. Back at her apartment, Lena was already asleep when they arrived. Julian didn't ask to come in. He stood in the hallway, hands in his jacket pockets, gaze flickering across the chipped doorframe, the loose tile by her threshold. "This place yours?" he asked softly. "Leased own," she said. 6 more years if nothing breaks." Julian nodded. "I like it. It looks like it's been earned." Mira gave a tired smile. "Good night, Julian." He hesitated. Then, as she turned to go, he said, "I didn't fall for you because you need saving. I fell because you don't." The door closed before she could respond. She leaned her forehead against it, breathing in silence. Outside, Julian waited a moment longer. And then he left, quietly. Not out of defeat, but out of respect. The days that followed passed without sound between them. Not silence, exactly, just a kind of mutual stillness. Mira didn't text. Julian didn't call. It wasn't a standoff. It was space. A breath taken by two people who cared more than they knew how to manage. Mira buried herself in routine, double shifts, school meetings, a leaking faucet she couldn't afford to fix. Her life had always been built around effort, not elegance. The rhythm of exhaustion was familiar, and it numbed her thoughts. Still, at odd moments, scrubbing dishes, waiting at a crosswalk, his voice surfaced. I didn't fall for you because you need saving. I fell because you don't. She hated how much that sentence stuck. Meanwhile, Julian sat in meetings he didn't care about. Revenue projections. Expansion pitches. Men in suits talking as though money solved hunger, as though charity and control were interchangeable. He smiled when he was supposed to. Nodded when it was expected. But at night, he came home to a condo that felt too quiet and a view of the skyline that meant nothing. He missed her. Not her presence, even. He missed the edge in her voice. The way she made him earn every word. He didn't want her softer. He wanted her honest. It was Lena who broke the standoff. On a damp Saturday afternoon, Mira opened her front door to find a package addressed to Lena Halden in carefully written black ink. No return address. Inside, a children's book, second-hand, with worn corners, and a note tucked into the jacket flap. Lena. Thought you might like this one. My mom used to read it to me when I was your age. It has a stubborn bird and a tree that won't give up. Felt like the right story. J. Mira read the note twice. Her chest ached with something between anger and affection. She didn't call. But that night, she placed the book on Lena's pillow and watched her daughter trace the cover with small fingers, whispering, Did Mr. Julian send this? Mira just nodded. The next day, she showed up at his office. No call ahead. No warning. She walked past the receptionist with a confidence she didn't quite feel and stepped into the glass-walled corner where he stood, sleeves rolled up, pacing across a floor made of polished stone. He froze when he saw her. Mira. I don't want your books, she said, quiet but steady. But Lena might. He swallowed. That wasn't the point of the book. I know, she said. It was the point of the gesture. Julian stepped closer. Then why are you here? She exhaled slowly. Because I think you mean what you say. And because I don't know how to be around someone who doesn't try to fix me. He didn't speak. So she added, I don't know what this is, Julian. But I'm tired of pretending it doesn't matter. The air between them stretched, thin with vulnerability. I've been waiting for you to say that, Julian said finally. Because I didn't want to say it first. Why not? Because you deserve to arrive on your own terms. Mira looked away, blinking fast. Her voice cracked despite her. I don't do this. I don't let people in. I know, Julian said softly. And I'm not people. I'm me. Just me. She laughed, short, pained. That's what scares me. I'm not going anywhere, he said. She believed him. And that was the scariest part. They didn't name it. Whatever this was between them, whatever had been simmering between sidelong glances, late texts, and unsent apologies, it remained undefined. Mira didn't ask. Julian didn't label. But something had shifted. In the days following their quiet confrontation in his office, they began to fold into each other's lives in unspoken ways. Mira didn't start calling him every day, but she stopped flinching when his name lit her phone. Julian didn't press for dinners, but he started showing up outside Lena's daycare on Fridays with paper bags of takeout and an awkward wave. Sometimes Mira invited him up. Sometimes she didn't. He never pushed. She came to understand that about him, that his steadiness wasn't performative. It wasn't an act. It was a rhythm. Julian Vance, the man with a penthouse and a payroll, had the strange gift of leaving space where others crowded. And in that space, Mira started to breathe differently. But breathing, she realized, wasn't the same as surrender. One night, after Lena had fallen asleep and the apartment was dark except for the streetlights slicing through the blinds, Mira and Julian sat on her warm couch, each holding a mug of tea they hadn't touched. Julian broke the silence first. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Okay. It's not about you. It's about me." She turned to look at him, caught off guard. He never centered himself in the narrative. "I've built this life," he said slowly, "with the understanding that everyone wants something from me. Contracts. Access. Control. And I accepted that. It made things easier. But then I met you, and you didn't want anything. You didn't take anything. That scared the hell out of me." Mira didn't respond. He went on. "You didn't ask for help. You made it very clear you didn't want saving. But I don't know how to be around someone who's not negotiating with me. I don't know how to love someone who won't let me offer anything but myself." Mira looked down at her hands. Then she said, almost whispering, "I've spent years learning how not to need. Needing got me abandoned. Depending got me disappointed. And I told myself if I could just build a life where everything rested on me, no one could take it away." Julian reached out, not to touch her, just to place his hand between them, open, palm up. An offering, not a demand. "And has it worked?" he asked gently. She laughed once, bitter and tired. "No. I'm exhausted. Every single day." There was silence between them. Not heavy. Just real. Mira set down her mug. "Do you know what the real risk is, Julian? It's not falling for someone like you. It's letting someone like you see me. The parts one keep patched together. The days when I wake up afraid and still pretend I'm not. That kind of exposure, it doesn't heal easily." Julian met her eyes. "Then let me be the one who doesn't flinch." And with that, something broke open inside her, not violently, not loudly. Just a quiet yielding. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He said nothing, just shifted closer, rested his chin lightly on her hair. They stayed like that for a long time. Not lovers. Not yet. Not exactly. But something deeper than strangers. Braver than friends. Two people learning how to trust in the slowest, most human way possible. The next morning, Mira woke to the sound of Lena laughing in the kitchen. She blinked, disoriented by sunlight. When she rose and padded barefoot into the hallway, she found Julian at the stove, hair unkempt, sleeves rolled up, attempting pancakes with comical precision. Lena stood on a stool beside him, holding a whisk like a microphone and narrating every step in dramatic fashion. "And then the pancake flips and everyone cheers," she declared. Julian bowed to imaginary applause. Mira leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, heart full of something she didn't yet have words for. He turned, caught her watching, and grinned sheepishly. "Hope you don't mind. She recruited me. She's very persuasive," Mira murmured. Lena looked up. "Mommy! He made funny ones shaped like bears." Julian shrugged. "Artistic license." Mira smiled. "Coffee? In the pot. Already poured you a cup." She stared at him for a moment. Not in awe. In recognition. This man, who could have stayed behind the desk, behind the title, behind the safety of polished words, he had shown up. In her world. In her kitchen. In a t-shirt, making pancakes with a 3-year-old. And he looked more at home here than anywhere else. She took the coffee, sipped, and joined them. Not all in. But closer. Spring came slowly that year. The kind of hesitant warmth that crept up through window panes and cracked sidewalks without announcing itself. One day the trees were bare, the next, Mira caught herself humming while folding laundry with the windows cracked. Change like that didn't always arrive with declarations. Sometimes it just settled into the corners of a life already in motion. Julian didn't move in. He didn't propose. What he did do was show up. Every Tuesday, he picked Lena up from daycare and took her for library visits or ice cream walks, even on rainy days. Every Friday, he helped Mira carry groceries up 3 flights of stairs, no questions asked. He never tried to buy his way into their world, he just made space in his own. And Mira, slow as a tide, began to trust that this wasn't a performance. It was simply who he was. One Sunday afternoon, while Lena napped and the apartment smelled faintly of lemon soap and sautéed onions, Mira sat across from Julian on the living room floor, sorting bills and repair receipts. He looked up from a crumpled water bill and asked, "Would you ever leave this place?" She blinked. "Leave it, how?" "Trade it in. For somewhere else. A different kind of stability." "You mean a bigger apartment?" "I mean a different life." Mira studied him. "That depends," she said. "Is this a rescue mission?" Julian smiled faintly. "No. It's a question. From one adult to another." She sat back, exhaled. "I've spent so long being afraid of losing everything that I started clinging to the chaos. Like it proved something. Like being exhausted made me righteous." Julian stayed silent, knowing this wasn't the kind of moment to interrupt. "I don't want to survive you, Julian," she said at last. "I don't want a man who builds me a home just so he can walk out of it when he's bored." He looked at her, not flinching, not shifting, and said, "Then let's build one you'd still want to stay in even if I did." Myra's throat tightened. She didn't say yes. She didn't need to. 6 months later, the dealership was quieter. Julian had stepped back. Partially, not entirely. Enough to breathe. Enough to make room. His board had questions. His investors had doubts. He didn't care. He'd appointed a new general manager. Sold one of the satellite locations. And started something smaller on the side, a fund for single parents navigating employment, education, and childcare. No press releases. No ribbon cuttings. He named it after Myra's mother, though Mira didn't know that yet. On the day they moved, Lena found a pinecone on the new apartment's doorstep and declared it magic. Mira laughed. "Why?" "Because it's round like a heart, and it's ours now." Julian raised an eyebrow. "The pinecone?" "No," Lena said. "The home." Mira looked at her daughter, then at Julian, standing beside a box of pans labeled kitchen but don't touch the spices, and something inside her settled, like a book finally closing on a chapter it didn't realize was finished. Not because it was perfect. Because it was real. They never had a wedding. There was no proposal, no white dress, no engraved invitations. But one rainy evening, after Lena had fallen asleep reading next to a pile of fairy tale books, Julian pulled a small, weathered ring from his pocket. Simple, gold, nothing flashy. He didn't kneel. He just held it out. "I know you don't want to promise," he said. "But I'm giving you one anyway. Not forever. Not until death. Just this, if you let me, I'll keep showing up. Even when it's hard. Especially then." Mira didn't cry. She smiled. A deep, tired, grateful smile. And took the ring. Not as a surrender. As a choice. 18 months after the day Mira Halden was nearly dismissed from a showroom floor, she stood in that same dealership, not as a customer, not as a story of pity, but as Julian's partner. Not in title. In truth. Paul was long gone. The staff had changed. And the coffee machine was still temperamental. Julian liked it that way. Some things weren't meant to be upgraded. They were meant to be remembered. In the end, no fairy tale had been written. No crowns handed out. No kingdoms restored. But in a modest home on the edge of the city, a woman who once believed she could only survive learned how to live. A man who once thought power was earned through deals learned how to hold space without trying to fill it. And a little girl, who liked her pancakes shaped like bears, never doubted that magic could come in the form of steady hands and second chances. This is where it ends. And where something better quietly began. Together.